Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carrie Stewart. I am a registered dietitian at Spartanburg Regional Healthcare System. I work in the Heart Resource Center, where our main mission is cardiovascular disease education and prevention, which we know is very tied to diet and nutrition. And with that being said, I do have Sam in the back with me. She will be running our AV, answering questions. So please feel free to type anything into the chat, and she is back there to assist me. Sam is a dietetic intern in the final stages of becoming a registered dietitian herself. So I'm really glad to have her assistance here this afternoon. We are coming to you live from Greer, South Carolina, in the Gibbs Cancer Center at Pelham in the ACOG Teaching Kitchen. And today, I apologize if you were really looking forward to our previous October event, but the Hurricane Helene graced us with her presence in this area, and that really threw a lot of things off. And for me, one of the things I realized I haven't thought much about, especially in my profession as a dietitian, and more as we get into the importance of cooking at home and the nutrition, the community that both of those things can bring, was disaster relief cooking. And the nonprofit organization World Central Kitchen has been on the ground in our area, definitely up with our friends in Western North Carolina, where a lot of our patients and a lot of our staff members for Spartanburg Regional reside. And so that led me to actually getting their cookbook here. And so we are going to do a recipe from their cookbook. But before we begin, I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about them in case you are like me and hadn't really heard much about it. So World Central Kitchen was founded by Jose Andres, which if you're a foodie in that world, then you might have been to some of his restaurants. He's world renowned at this point for a lot of his restaurants. We have quite a few in the United States here. But in he won a award called a Vilcek Award for $50,000, and that was really the base sum that he used to launch this nonprofit World Central Kitchen. And there's so much other history that I'm leaving out, so you'll have to read the book and learn a lot more about it yourself. But what really happened is that it wasn't known as a disaster relief organization until Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico. And these folks were some of the first on the ground before a lot of other organizations were even still trying to figure out logistically what they were going to do and how they were going to do it. World Central Kitchen was there feeding people. And you think about that and what the importance of that is like, right? A lot of us here in this area were without power for a week. Some folks, unfortunately, even more than a week. And what does that do to what you're eating and how you're preparing food? And like I said, that sense of community. And so World Central Kitchen really focuses on using the restaurants and the local food sources that they can in that area, or at least relatively close to that area, and getting food out as quickly to people as they possibly can. Because if you're in the midst of cleanup of a natural disaster, there's a lot of labor to be done there. And a warm meal after you've been working really hard all day is so comforting, it's nourishing, and it's important to keep that coming. So that's a little bit about World Central Kitchen and their mission. What I like about their cookbook is that it's written in a really unique way because of that disaster relief framework. So there are 7 values, and the recipes are actually broken up into those different values. So empathy, urgency, adaptation, hope, community, resilience, and joy. And so what I'm going to do with you this afternoon is a recipe from the urgency sector. And that seems pretty common sense when it comes to disaster relief, right? The urgency that needs to occur with starting to feed people and starting to feed them soon so that they can do the necessary work needed. And so with that, I learned that World Central Kitchen works to establish a kitchen, if possible, before the natural disaster even hits. so that they are able to start meal delivery and meal service pretty much instantly after that happens. And so if not, then they're looking to establish that kitchen on site there within hours. So for example, in the Bahamas, before one of the hurricanes came through there, they worked to establish the logistics and the food supply and start cooking some of these things about 100 miles away so that then they could get in there and start that work. Um, you know, one thing that happened here too was that a lot of, with electricity being down, people didn't have a way to purchase food because so many of us don't carry cash anymore. And a lot of us are carrying cards, but all of the credit card readers were down. So you might even have money to go and purchase food, but if the card readers aren't working, you don't have a way to get it. So there's a time and a place that everyone can just come together and be served a meal no matter what your needs are in this case. Um, so Jose likes to wear a shirt that says, "My slow is your fast." And there's another phrase that they use, that the urgency is now. So these recipes in this section are meant to be eaten quickly. They're meant to be eaten on the go. A lot of them are handheld. So sandwich is what we're going to do today. So a lot of these are handheld and can be driven across areas, bagged up in brown paper bags type of situation so that it can get out to people that are boots on the ground versus bringing people to a communal area. So quickly eaten, easily adaptable, as you'll see there. So with that being said, we're going to start cooking. Actually, I already started cooking. I wish you could smell how good it is. It smells in here right now. So we're making Basil Aioli breakfast Sandos. And I did go ahead and take the liberty of starting to adapt the recipe. I figured if anybody didn't mind, that it was Jose Andres that wouldn't have mind. And that is the purpose of these recipes, is they're meant to be adapted based upon what you've got in terms of equipment and in terms of food. So this recipe I chose for two reasons. One, because it's got some really unique cooking techniques that I had not used before now. And second, because this is one of the American recipes that came in the cookbook. So it's World Central Kitchen. So there's so many neat global flavors going on in here. I would highly recommend checking it out. But this sandwich idea and concept came from 2018 to 2019. There was a period of time where our federal government shut down and those employees were not being paid. So World Central Kitchen set up shop between the White House and the Capitol, and they started Chefs for Feds. And this was one of the breakfast sandwich offerings that they supplied during that period of time. So we have a couple different recipes within this sandwich. We've got oven roasted tomatoes, basil aioli, and we're going to make sheet pan eggs, which is really what blew my mind, and then assemble it all together for a sloppy but absolutely delicious sandwich. So the oven roasted tomatoes took a while to make. So what we did was we took Roma tomatoes, we cut those in half, and a little bit of thyme, salt, pepper, olive oil, a couple of fresh cloves of garlic. We tossed that all together, and very specifically on an aluminum lined pan with the rounded side down. So the cut side was facing up. We have our tomatoes in here roasting. That's going to take anywhere from 40 to 50 minutes, which is why I went ahead and started that. A roasted tomato on a breakfast sandwich was never something I had thought about. I liked using these big Roma tomatoes because if you do want to do this recipe exclusively plant-based, then these are nice, big, fat, juicy, thick tomatoes. So it's really going to be a lot more satisfying. You could add 2 of those to it if you wanted to do that there. So I'll show you what those look like in a little bit. The recipe calls for fresh thyme, but when I was testing it, I actually did it with a half of a teaspoon of dried thyme so that it got covered all over it. And then that way I really got the thyme flavor, which is something that I wanted on my tomatoes. So you can use the fresh thyme if you've got it instead. And you can go in that direction. All right. So next we're going to actually start to make the aioli, and that's a nice fancy way of saying a sauce. So I'm going to preheat my pan here, and all this is doing is, I got it on about medium. All this is going to do is toast up our pine nuts. So for our aioli, we've got pine nuts here, and this is going to be a heaping tablespoon of pine nuts. So I am going to go ahead and toast or put them in now while it's heating up, because I feel like that gives any nut just the chance to slowly start to toast, and it doesn't take long at all. But this is something that can enhance the flavor of your nuts so much. So walnuts, pecans, almonds, if you get them raw and you toast them up, it does bring out a different flavor, a nice sweetness, earthiness to them. That's great on salads and other things. But in this case, we're doing this pesto style aioli. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we've got the oven going. So I did want to mention one of the other things that you could do if you didn't have a stovetop is that you could also just throw the pine nuts in the oven for a short amount of time, no more than probably about 5 minutes. And you might as well, you already got the oven on, you might as well use it, so you can do it that way. But we're just going to do the stovetop because I wanted to show you another technique there. All right. So while that happens, we've got basil. So I'm going to go ahead and wash my hands first, and then food safety always. Definitely another important part of disaster relief cooking. We definitely don't want anyone getting sick from the water. All right. So we've got a half of a cup of basil. And when I first made this, I did not have quite enough basil. So it depends on if you're a basil lover like I am or not. But I'm doing a compact, this even looks like a lot. I might take a couple leaves off. So compact half of a cup of basil. I'm just going to put it in my blender here. It smells so great. Then we've got 2 cloves of garlic. And so something interesting, adaptation, got to work on the fly here. One of the things that I didn't want to do was dirty up a knife just to smash my garlic. So I realized that I've got this nice flat surface spatula, and you can do the same exact thing that you would do with a knife. So just take that spatula, and then that makes it very kid safe way to get your peel of your garlic right off of there. Now this is raw garlic, so if you don't want it spicy, you may want to just do 1. Or what I think the best idea would be is probably to take the roasted garlic that's coming out of the tomatoes in the oven and put the roasted garlic in here, because that would be extra delicious. But for the sake of time and logistics, we're not going to do that today. So then we've got a teaspoon of lemon juice, and I found that that's about 1/6 of a wedge or of a lemon. So it's a teaspoon. Again, I'm gonna make sure my seeds aren't in here. So I'm just gonna hold my hand underneath while I squeeze this lemon into my blender here. Right. Nope, no seeds. So there we go. But that way, that's just a little trick there. So yeah, about 1/6 of a nice juicy lemon will give you about a teaspoon there. If you like a little more, add a little more. You can always add a little zest too. But I really thought that the amounts were perfect in terms of the acidity and the basil, the toasted pine nuts. So I'm just going to continuously keep checking on my pine nuts over here because we want them to toast evenly. So we don't want them to sit in one spot too long. All right, now I'm going to add just a little bit of salt and pepper here. And I'm not going to do a ton because of the mayonnaise that I'm using is going to contain a decent amount of salt, 100 milligrams. And we don't really need, we need just a little bit to make all these flavors come together, but we don't want it to be too salty because it's going to take away from all the other awesome flavors going on here. All right, so I'm going to pulse this just to roughly get this going first. And as expected, I'm probably going to really need the mayonnaise there to get it all to come together. All right, one more time here, just a little bit. Okay. Now, fun trick. Shake up my mayonnaise. And then I'm going to put this basil aside here, put it back really. And one of the things when you're working with certain ingredients that are hard to get out of a measuring cup, one of the things you can do is spray them with cooking spray before you put your ingredient in here, and then it will drop right out into your dish. Sometimes you might think, oh, I don't really want that little bit of oil or a little bit of cooking spray flavor, but we're making basically an oil-based sauce, which is what mayonnaise is. So it's not going to change the flavor at all. It's just going to make your life easier. So here I go. I'm going to spray my measuring cup. And then honestly, I'm going to end up using the whole rest of this. So I did buy plant-based mayo just for my plant-based friends out there. This works great in here. If you would prefer not to use the plant-based variety, you can, but I just wanted you to know it tastes delicious and it works great. So I'm probably didn't even really need to measure this, but rather get as much out of it as I possibly could. So do that there. And let this sit for a second. I keep checking on my pine nuts over here. I'm going to give them a smell. Oh, yeah. All right. I see. There we go. Yep. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and turn this off because the last thing I want to do is burn them. And then I'm going to hold it right here so you can kind of see how lovely and toasted some of them are. And it smells really, really good. Okay. So I'm going to set this aside just so they can keep cooking a little bit, but not too much. All right. We're going to try and get all this out here. Now look, there goes my mayonnaise right out of my cup and into my blender. So that worked great. All right, let's see. Making a mess. There we go. I like this because it's basically taking regular mayonnaise. If you want to make your own mayonnaise, you're more than welcome to do that too. But it's basically just doctoring up regular mayonnaise into a sauce that is so tasty. And again, I just keep thinking about, after a really long, hard day's work, or maybe in the example of the chefs for feds where, you're worried about your income, how much a tasty meal can mean. Talking to a lot of folks around here, there's a lot of peanut butter and jellies that were eaten during that time, and a lot of people just taking for granted sometimes what a nice, warm, tasty meal can be. So I really like that. Okay. We're going to see how this goes. I'm going to try and squeeze out a little bit more here. Sam, will you see if you can find me a knife, please? I think I had, all right, there we go. I knew this would probably make 2 batches. So I'm trying to get every last little drop out. I don't really love plain mayonnaise, but I do love some Basil Aioli. So now we made it sound super fancy. Okay. Perfect. Yes. All right. Sam's grabbing me a butter knife, but I think I did a pretty good job. One of our other little tricks, secrets to that is to add a little bit of water, because just a little bit of water isn't going to hurt it. So, and then you can shake it up. And that way get every last little drop. I do this for marinara sauce. I do this for other salad dressings, things like that. Okay. There we go. All right. Okay. I think that'll be as much as we can get. And again, I added a little bit of salt, but not much, because I didn't want the saltiness to be overpowering, since it is mayonnaise. All right. So, see, our pine nuts are a little bit warm. That's okay. Go ahead and pour them in, but they do recommend that you cool them off. Ooh, and before we do that, we're going to check out our tomatoes. So our timer is going off for our roasted tomatoes. Again, I don't know why the thought had never occurred to me that I could roast tomatoes like this and add them to a breakfast sandwich. So let's see. Oh man, I think these look perfect, honestly. Might leave them in for maybe 5 more minutes, but they are looking good. They're looking really good and smelling even better. So there's still, I could tell there's still a lot of water in those tomatoes, and there will be, and then you're gonna smush it and it's gonna juice all over the place, but that's okay. All right, I'm gonna get a little bit prepared for my tomatoes. So I'm gonna move this hot pad right here. Move this over here. Okay. Now we're gonna blend this up. This is probably gonna take a couple tries. When I first made this, I did it in just a handheld smoothies container, like the single serving smoothie style blender, and it worked great. So you could do it in your food processor, whatever you've got there. So here we go. And we'll probably scrape the sides down a couple times just to make sure I can still see some of the white mayonnaise. Oh, we had some pine nuts jump all the way up to the top here. And it is already turning into a beautiful green sauce. Right. Don't even want to waste this. But you know what? I'm going to taste it in a second just to see if it does need a little anything. All right, ready? Here we go again. Right. And I'm going to scrape one more time just because, again, I can still see some white mayonnaise that's getting shot up the sides here. Oh my goodness. Basil is incredible for us. We don't often think of it as a dark leafy green, but it is. So the more ways you can find to enjoy it, the better. Pesto is certainly a great way to get in a lot in a little bit. All right. One more time, real quick. All right. That's great. Now, so one of the interesting things that I was reading about in this section is that oftentimes what you might hear being shouted along this sandwich assembly line at a World Central Kitchen operation is Más Mayo. And I wanted to read you just a little bit of what this paragraph says about it. So, the sandwich line is the beating heart of any World Central Kitchen relief response. WCK style sandwiches are not that complex. Take 2 slices of bread, add sliced ham or turkey, sliced cheese, and a healthy, and we do mean healthy, dollop of mayo ketchup, a Puerto Rican bred Jose endorsed blend of mayonnaise and ketchup that gets generously slathered on both sides of each bread. Más mayo, we all hear echoing in our heads long after the day is over. Constructing the sandwich is only part of the recipe, which also calls for long tables, many hands, a song or two, good conversation, and plenty of patience. A well-oiled sandwich line can produce 1,000 sandwiches an hour, 10,000 in a day in and day out. Each one will then be placed in a brown paper bag with a piece of fruit and sometimes a container of salad, closed with a WCK sticker and sent out the door to hungry families, first responders, and well, anyone who needs lunch on the go. So somewhere also within this text, it says that maybe mayo is the metaphor for the oil that keeps a well-oiled machine running. And isn't that the case with an operation producing 10,000 sandwiches a day? So one of the things that's interesting, and I'm about to do exactly the opposite, is that they ask you, do you think it's more efficient to put mayonnaise in a squeeze bottle or sorry, aioli in a squeeze bottle, or is it more efficient to just spoon it on to the sandwiches? And apparently the correct answer is not a squeeze bottle, but I forgot my jar. So I'm putting it in a squeeze bottle today. Sam is going to take our tomatoes out here. I want to get every last drop of this into my squeeze bottle. And like I said, really I can feel Jose saying, "Shame on you. You even read the directions and you're doing exactly what we told you not to." However, I am also not trying to make 10,000 sandwiches a day. All right. Sam, if you want to put that either on the Yep, you can put it right there. Yeah. Oh man, that looks so good. Okay. So probably this is why this is not as efficient as just spooning it out of, honestly, probably what they prepared it in. So, all right. Oh, now I'm making a nice good mess. All right. So that's probably exactly why this is not the most efficient way of doing this. All right. I'm going to clean up a little bit here. But I have to say, the green looks great. And it looks, I'm sure there's a lot of very spooky recipes that you could create in time for Halloween tomorrow with this green goo. Oh my gosh, that is so good though. Okay. I think it's got the perfect amount of salt. Oh man, that's great. So really not hard at all, but again, transforming mayonnaise, which some people love it, some people don't, into something. And the other way I think about it too is just the calories. So again, if you're only going to get the chance to eat a sandwich here and there throughout that day, that work day, then it's possible that, we need to add as many calories to something because it might be someone's only meal that day. So sauces are a really great way to do that. And why not make sure that they've got a ton of flavor? So I have never really tried mayo ketchup either, but I think I need to try that now. So, oops, I don't know what I'm doing. I need this here. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to bump up the oven to, oh, you did? You turned it to 425? Oh, thank you. She already turned it to 425. One step ahead of me. Thank you, Sam. So the tomatoes, I'm going to show you right now. And there we are. So get a load of those again, and they're going to start to deflate a little bit while the rest of this is cooking. These are going to be so hot. So it's another reason to go ahead and just make your tomatoes in advance. Like I said, you can see some of my roasted garlic here. I think if you timed it properly, that would be a great thing to add to your aioli instead of just the plain garlic. It's also going to dull the spiciness of the garlic if you roast it first. So it's going to make it a little bit more buttery. So I love that idea too. So there are our tomatoes, and you can see they're nicely evenly coated with thyme there, which is what I preferred. All right, so now what we're going to do is the eggs. And so to do that, I'm actually going to remove our tomatoes here in our foil. And I'm going to set these right here. Boop. So this is exactly what it says to do. You roast your tomatoes, then remove the foil. Then we're going to add parchment paper, and we're going to preheat our pan while it's preheating in the oven here to 425. So, all right. And we want it preheated for at least 10 minutes. This oven takes a long time, so I have a feeling it will be more than enough time by me throwing this parchment on here right now. So, cover in parchment versus the foil. And I'm sure there is a reason behind that. If anyone knows what that is, please feel free to tell me. But seeing as I had never baked eggs in the oven like this, I wanted to make sure I followed those exact directions. Here we go. It's going to turn your parchment all brown, but it shouldn't burn. So pay attention to that there. All right. So then I've got my eggs. This says to do 4 eggs. But I found that I was using such big tomatoes that 1 tomato was really enough for 1 breakfast sandwich. Again, if you want to do this exclusively whole food, plant-based, then you could go ahead and do 2 tomatoes. Or I think what would be really nice is some marinated tempeh and barbecue sauce, and you can bake your tempeh while some of these other ingredients are baking. Then it's almost like a BLT with basil aioli and roasted tomatoes. My gosh, this is great. Okay. So I have my glass measuring cup, and I'm just going to crack all my eggs in here carefully so that the yolks don't burst. And I'm going to do 6 because, like I said, when I was testing this, what I found is really that I needed more eggs because I wanted more sandwiches. So I have seen microwave versions of poached eggs that work pretty well in terms of quickness. But in terms of mass producing egg sandwiches, it does make sense that baking them on a sheet pan might work. Oh, I got a little bit of shell there. There we go. Okay. And being that I am getting raw egg all over my fingers, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I wash them because I have a lot of ingredients here that we are then going to eat raw or have already been cooked. All right, there's a little bit of shell down in there. Okay, got it. All right, let me wash my hands again. So obviously, if you want the yolk to be nice and runny, then cooking it for about this 5 minutes will do. But that's all. So it's only going to take 5 minutes to cook once we take out our sheet pan, and that has not been 10 minutes. So I'm going to give it a little bit more time to preheat. Then I'm going to spray it down with my cooking spray and then pour the eggs on. So we're going to try and do all that quickly. We're going to try to get our cooking spray out, pour our eggs in, and put it back in the oven as fast as we can. So again, the urgency is now. And then it'll only take about 5 minutes to cook. So I'm going to move this so I can prepare myself for this activity. All right, I'm going to get my hot pad back out right here. I'm going to move our, there we go. And while I give it another minute before we do this, I'm going to, I decided to use English muffins. So the recipe, calls for Kaiser rolls, 8 slices of sandwich bread. Again, I figured Jose wouldn't mind if I took the liberty to use an English muffin instead. And I have a small sheet pan that I'm just going to warm these up while our eggs are cooking. These are actually the Dave's Killer Bread ones. So some nice sprouted whole grain English muffins in that way. Just cut these in half. And, here's where my thought process was going, was that these have a lot of nice little nooks and crannies that our Basil Aioli is going to soak all into and be extra delicious. All right. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat here. But this is all really pretty simple to do. It does take certain equipment that you may or may not have, of course, but just like I said, a really different way of doing this, and especially for mass producing cooked eggs at one time, which I really thought was interesting. One of the things that I forgot was a pizza cutter, but that's one of the ways they recommend cutting the eggs into the sandwiches. And I originally did this recipe with 4. I think if you were only going to do 4, you might want to try to use a smaller sheet pan like this, because I just had my normal size cookie sheet. And so it did make the yolks kind of uneven in terms of how much white was surrounding it. So I kind of cut a little bit of white off this side and added it to another sandwich on the other side that way. So, all right, I'm going to grab out our preheated sheet pan. So again, we started at 400 to roast our tomatoes. We bumped it up to 425. And there you can see our parchment has browned a little bit there. And so I'm going to spray and make sure that my parchment is all the way up. And there we go. I'm not doing this quickly, but I'm going to grab out a little bit of shell that I see. And there already my eggs are floating around here. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to put these in with one hand. All right, here we go. Okay. Now, 5 minutes is, thank you, is all we're going to need for those. Let's go ahead and set that timer so that I don't forget. And then I'm going to, sorry, wash my hands real quick. Thank you. Actually, you can leave that. I'm going to try and get more of it out. Okay. Yeah. All right, so lots of things that we can top our sandwiches with too. Go. All right. And thank you. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to also throw these in. So probably they don't want us to let too much heat out for our eggs. However, I did want to toast those just a little bit so that they add a nice caramelization to those grains there, giving them a nice little extra sweetness. And the recipe calls for arugula. So I did really like the idea of adding a basil sauce to that spicy arugula. Arugula is also a great nitric oxide producer, meaning a vasodilator. So it is one of the best, or it is the best nitric oxide producer in terms of food that we can eat. So if we dilate our vessels open, then we actually reduce our blood pressure. Nitric oxide is also known to lower our LDL cholesterol, decrease inflammation. If our vessels are open, remember we have arteries that run from the top of our head to the bottom of our feet. We see reductions in things like Alzheimer's and dementia. We see improvements in things like peripheral neuropathy if you have diabetes and are starting to lose some of the feeling there. Improvements in the way we breathe with things like COPD and emphysema. When those vessels around our lungs are open enough to get that oxygen out of our lungs and to the rest of our body systems. For any athletes out there, those that are eating a lot of nitric oxide foods restore their muscles better because the vessels are open. They can bring sugar back to our muscles, that glucose to and proteins to heal better after physical activity. So all sorts of reasons to incorporate arugula into your diet. You might not be an arugula lover, but maybe this is a great way to try it. And in this combination of tomatoes and sauce, and in our case, we're going to use some pickled red onions. This is colorful cooking at home after all. So we've got red, we've got green, we've got purple, but also I guess technically red when you're thinking about those nutrients that are beneficial there. So it's going to look quite lovely in terms of all this. Um, so does anyone have any questions right now, Sam?
No, no questions yet.
No questions? Okay. Again, I mean, all this is really quite easy in terms of what I'm doing physically. And then I think the only other things that I want to leave you with in terms of some of the things that the book was sharing, which I have barely scratched the surface of, but one of the reasons that we do these cooking demonstrations and we host cooking classes is to bring people together around a table to share a meal together, whether it's your family or your friends or whomever, because there is that sense of community that occurs, and especially even more so when disaster strikes. So one of the lessons that they quickly learned was about the importance of table space. And so World Central Kitchen was on the ground in Haiti after some of their hurricanes, and they went to serve an area that had a lot of mothers with babies. And so here they had this great handheld sandwich, but the mothers are holding the babies because there's disaster, there's no tables, there's no chairs, there's nothing like that. So they're trying to hold their baby, they're trying to eat their sandwich at the same time. If you've ever done that, it's kind of difficult. And so that's when they really started to consider the importance of setting tables for everyone to not only just sit down, but take a load off, get to talk to your neighbor a little bit, and enjoy that meal that you can have, that one, warm meal that you might be able to get that day, for example. So, table space when it comes to the logistics of sandwich building and or sharing community, there's a lot to be said for that. So can you make all these sandwiches, clear off the same tables, and then set them so that people are actually able to sit and dine and enjoy? But that just became another piece of what they try to do, is make sure that that safe spot is offered. So I appreciated that. And we've seen a lot of that in what we've been doing too, in terms of family units eating together, and friends. It doesn't matter, friends like family. So last thing that he said, no matter the scale, taste, 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 taste. So what that means All right. Is, all right, there. Ooh, nice and warm. Perfect. And check on our eggs. So I think our eggs are a little jiggly still. So I'm going to put that back in for another maybe 2 minutes, maybe one. Let's do one. I accidentally did. Boop. All right. Accidentally did the oven temperature instead of the time. That would be tragic. All right. So, when we're preparing food, we always want to stop and taste as we go. And I think a lot of people, maybe sometimes you're afraid to taste it. Oh no, what if it doesn't taste good and I just put all that work into it? But if we're tasting as we go, we can stop and we can add things to our recipe to hopefully change it and make sure that it's going to be delicious. I just made this the other day, so I had full trust that my aioli was going to turn out great. But otherwise, pick up, keep spooning your aioli out. There's not too much to really taste test here, but I think that's as you're preparing things in these big old quantities. Great, thank you. One of the things that we want to do is continue to taste our food as we go. So don't be afraid to stop and do that, because the last thing you want to do is get to the very end and not really be able to fix it. All right, so there's our timer again for just that extra minute. Again, depends on your preference. If you like your eggs extra runny, great. If you don't, leave them in there for a little bit longer. I felt like the whites were still a little bit too jiggly. So that's kind of what we're looking at, is the whites around the yolk. Yep, that's all we needed. Was that one more minute, I think. All right. So here we are. So you can see how you may actually benefit from doing the full sheet pan of all the eggs. So this was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This was 6. So if you did 12, you wouldn't get this. This is just really thin egg white that cooked up right here. Nothing to worry about, just crunchy. You can eat it if you want. Leave it off if you don't. And I knew I needed my knife for one reason or another, but I think I should just be able to do this with a fork. So I am just going to cut around this part here. And there's my egg. I can see it starting to break. So I'm going to transfer it. Actually, no, I told you I wanted to do aioli in both my nooks and crannies sides of this. Oh, yeah. All right. I'm going to do a nice swirl. Más Mayo, everybody. Oh, yeah. Okay. Now we're going to add the egg here. And then I think I'm going to kind of cut this one on this side. Good. But how easy? 5 minutes for all those eggs. I absolutely learned something new. So there on the bottom. All right, there we go. And now I've got tomatoes. So again, I think I'm just going to do 1 tomato because my sandwich really only has room for about 1 tomato. Jiggly. This is going to be messy, guys, but it's going to taste so good. Okay. These are just some pickled onions that I made because, again, I wanted a little bit of extra color. Maybe we could do that. Show you a little open face action going on there. I knew that contrasting color would be so pretty. So I know you can see that now. And then before I cover it up with arugula. So again, very easy to adapt this. If you don't love basil, you could just do roasted garlic aioli, and I think it would be just as delicious. Here we go. You could, of course, do a green that isn't quite as peppery as arugula. Choose your own adventure, or in the case of disaster relief, use what you got. So that is all we've got for you today. If anyone has any questions, please let us know. I'm going to hold up our sandwiches here. I'm not going to go. I can already see my egg yolk starting to burst there. So I'm not going to go too far. There you go. And put the top on here. I think I'm going to go ahead and squish it down. There you go. You can see all of our juices running out there. And I am very much looking forward to lunch. Thank you so much for joining us. We will send out the recording with the recipes once we receive the YouTube link back. And we really appreciate your time and sharing this space with us. So with that being said, if there are no more questions, thank you very much. And I hope that you'll consider joining us in November. We've got certified diabetes care and education specialist Madison Pate, who is going to do a sriracha roasted chickpea salad. I think there's some quinoa, there's some arugula going on in there too. So whether or not you have diabetes, we'd love for you to join us because it's going to be a great recipe. And then Gina Turcott, who is from our Spartanburg Regional Foundation, is going to share some of her Filipino heritage with a couple of different dishes that are most commonly used in celebratory ways. So she is Filipino, and we are greatly looking forward to her joining us in December. So thank you very much, and we hope you have a great rest of the day.